I am 84 years old, and I have begun to understand what my silence cost my family. It has taken me this long to say that plainly. 84 years, and only now do I see that the quiet I wore like a virtue was something else entirely. At this age, the days are short, not in hours, but in number. I feel that. When I wake up, there is a small moment of surprise. Another morning, another chance to sit in this chair by the window and think about the things I did not say. I used to believe silence kept the peace. I believed that if I swallowed my anger, if I tucked away my disappointment, if I refused to speak about what hurt me, then the house would remain steady. The children would feel safe. My husband would not be burdened. We would go on, and we did go on. That is the strange part. Life did not collapse. There were no dramatic scenes. We had dinners at the table. We celebrated birthdays. We took photographs at graduations. From the outside, we were an ordinary, decent family. But inside that quiet, something thinned. When I was in my 20s, I was not a silent woman. I had opinions. I laughed loudly. I argued about books. I told my sisters exactly what I thought of their boyfriends. I imagined marriage as a partnership where words moved freely across the table. I married at 26. He was steady, kind in a reserved way, not a man of many words either. I mistook that for depth. In the beginning, when something bothered me, I would try to talk about it. I remember one evening in our small kitchen. The paint was still fresh. We had been married less than a year. He had promised to come home early for dinner, and he didn't. No call, no explanation. When he walked in, I started to tell him how it felt to sit there waiting. He looked tired. He loosened his tie and said, "It was a long day. I don't want to argue." So I stopped. It seemed reasonable. He worked hard. I told myself that being understanding was part of love. That was the first small stone. After our first child was born, I was tired in a way I had never known. The nights were broken, the days were full of diapers and laundry, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I would wait for him to come home just to hear another adult voice. Sometimes he would. Sometimes he would sit with the baby and let me shower. But often he was distant, preoccupied, his mind still at work. I wanted to tell him I felt alone, that I needed more than his paycheck and his presence in the room. But I remembered that first evening in the kitchen. I remembered how quickly he withdrew when things felt heavy. So I told myself it was temporary. I told myself all young mothers felt this way. I told myself not to be ungrateful, and I stayed quiet. Silence can feel noble at first, like restraint, like maturity. I prided myself on not nagging, on not raising my voice. My friends would complain about their husbands. I would listen and think, I'm better than that. I don't bring conflict into my home. What I did not understand was that I was also not bringing myself into it. Our children grew, two of them, a boy and a girl. They were bright and curious. They would come to me with their small heartbreaks, a mean teacher, a lost friend, a fear of not being good enough. I listened carefully. I offered gentle words. I told them it was all right to feel sad, to feel angry. I see the irony now. I gave them permission to feel, but I never showed them how I felt. When their father and I disagreed, we did it behind closed doors. Or rather, I disagreed inside my own head. He would make decisions about money, about vacations, about schools. Sometimes I thought he was wrong. Sometimes I felt overlooked. But I would nod. I would adjust. I would smooth things over later. I believed I was protecting the children from tension. What I was really teaching them was that tension disappears when one person disappears. There were ordinary moments, so ordinary that they did not seem important at the time. My daughter, at 16, slammed her bedroom door after an argument with her father. He had told her she was being dramatic. I had seen her face when he said it. the way it crumpled for just a second before she hardened it. She came into the kitchen later, eyes red. "Do you think I'm dramatic?" she asked me. I could have told her that her feelings made sense, that her father sometimes spoke too sharply, that I had felt the same sting many times. Instead, I said, "He didn't mean it that way. You know how he is." I thought I was helping her forgive him. What I was doing was asking her to do what I had always done: absorb it, move on, don't make it bigger. She learned that lesson well. My son was quieter. He rarely argued. He began spending more time outside the house in his late teens. I told myself that was normal for a boy his age, but there were evenings when he would sit at the table, barely speaking, and I could sense something unsettled in him. I wanted to ask deeper questions, but our home was not a place for deep questions. It was a place for routine, for keeping things even. So I asked about school, about work. I kept it light. We became a family of polite conversations. Years passed that way: work, meals, holidays, college applications, weddings. If you had asked me then whether I was happy, I would have said yes. I had what I thought I was supposed to want: stability, a husband who provided, children who stayed out of serious trouble. There were no disasters, just a steady narrowing. My husband and I stopped trying to talk about anything that might lead to disagreement. We discussed logistics, groceries, bills, the car needing service. When something hurt me, I folded it into myself. When something disappointed him, he retreated into his newspaper. We grew older beside each other like two trees whose branches no longer touched. I don't blame him entirely. That would be too simple. I helped build that distance, brick by brick, word by unsaid word. The first real crack showed when my daughter went through her divorce. She was in her late 30s. She came to stay with us for a few weeks. One night, after the children were asleep upstairs, she sat across from me at the kitchen table. The same kitchen, though renovated by then. She looked exhausted. "I don't know how to talk to him," she said about her husband. "Every time I try, it turns into nothing, or I end up apologizing just to end it." I felt something sharp in my chest. I recognized that pattern. I had lived it for decades. She looked at me as if waiting for something more than sympathy. I could have told her the truth, that I had done the same, that keeping quiet does not keep love alive, that it erodes it slowly. But the habit was too deep. I said, "Sometimes marriage is about compromise." She nodded, but there was a flicker in her eyes. A disappointment, maybe, or distance. It was then I began to suspect that my silence had not protected them. It had shaped them. The moment of irreversibility came quietly. My husband had a stroke when he was 79. It was not immediate death. It was worse in some ways. He survived, but he was changed. His speech slowed. His body weakened. For the first time in our marriage, he depended on me completely. We spent long hours together in the living room, the television murmuring in the background, his words coming out in fragments. One afternoon, he tried to say something that seemed important. He struggled, frustrated. I leaned closer. "I should have," he began, but he could not finish. I don't know what he was trying to say. I will never know. He died 6 months later. At the funeral, people spoke about his steadiness, his reliability, his quiet strength. I stood there and realized how little of our inner life anyone had seen, how little of it we had even shared with each other. After he was gone, the house became unbearably silent, not the comfortable silence I had once valued, a hollow one. My children visited, but not often. They had their own lives, their own distances. When they sat with me, the conversations felt careful, respectful, as if there were things none of us quite knew how to say. One evening, my son, now a middle-aged man, asked me, "Were you happy, Mom?" It was a simple question. I opened my mouth to give the easy answer, the one I had rehearsed for years, but I stopped. I thought of the kitchen at 26, of the times I swallowed words, of my daughter's red eyes, of my son's quiet retreats. I said, I don't know if I was brave enough to be. He looked at me for a long time. That was the first honest sentence I had spoken about my marriage in decades. But it was late. So late. What is permanently lost is not dramatic. It is not a single event I can point to. It is the version of our family that might have existed if I had spoken. The arguments we might have had, the discomfort we might have endured, the deeper understanding that might have followed. I cannot go back and show my children that their mother had a full voice, that she felt anger and disappointment and longing and did not always smooth them away. I cannot show my husband who I might have been if I had insisted on being heard. Time does not return for revisions. Now, at 84, I sit with the weight of that. I do not tell this story to blame him or to blame myself entirely. I tell it because I see how easy it is to confuse quiet with kindness. If you are listening to me, I do not want to instruct you. I am not in a position to hand out advice. I can only tell you what it felt like to wake up at this age and realize that peace purchased with silence is fragile. It looks solid for years. Then one day you find that your children do not quite know you, that your husband never fully did, that you do not even know yourself as clearly as you might have. I wish I had understood that love can survive disagreement. I wish I had known that tension does not destroy a family as surely as distance does. But wishes are thin things at this stage. What remains are small moments. My daughter calling me last month, her voice softer now, telling me she is trying in her new relationship to speak more plainly. My son sitting across from me again, asking harder questions. There is still time for a little honesty. Not enough to rewrite the past, but enough to soften its edges. I grow tired more easily. Some afternoons, I fall asleep in this chair and wake up disoriented, unsure of the day. I know I do not have many years left, perhaps not even many seasons. The house is quiet again, truly quiet. Sometimes I speak aloud just to hear my own voice in the room. It sounds older than I expect. If I have any acceptance now, it is this: I cannot change what my silence cost. I can only refuse to carry it further. So I speak, even when my voice shakes, even when it feels unfamiliar. 84 years is a long time to learn something so simple, but it is the age I am. And this is what I finally understand.